right. I've got to run. Bye-bye.
She's acting like nothing is happening at all. This is getting very interesting.
Hello again and welcome back. Did you notice a grammatical form that they used to and get used to? Did you pick that up when they were speaking? Because these are forms that we use in English when we're talking about habits. It's not an easy form, and I'd like to teach you that now. And to do that, to give you an example of the grammar in action, I want to talk to you about when I moved to Italy and I lived there for some time, and I had to change some of my habits. I had to adopt some Italian habits. I had to get used to new things, all right? So I'm going to use the grammar construction as I talk about this. Try and listen and pick it up. Now, I wrote a list actually because really fascinating. You would think that Italy and England being very close wouldn't be very different, but in fact there are some noticeable differences. For example, driving on the right. I had to get used to driving on the right. In England, we drive on the left. So you can imagine it's a question of life and death. So the first thing was I had to get used to driving on the right. You hear that? To get used to driving on the right. Now that means that I had to adopt a new habit, to get used to doing something. We'll look at the grammatical form after. For now, just listen how I use it, all right? Another thing, oh yeah, Italian driving. I had to get used to Italian driving. Red lights are not really red lights. Red lights, traffic lights, are negotiable. And I had to get used to being very flexible driving on the roads in Italy, I can assure you. Now, speaking Italian. Now, when you speak Italian, you divide the world into masculine and feminine. And you know that in the English language, we don't have masculine and feminine. For table is neutral, whereas in Italian, it can be masculine or feminine. For example, a computer is masculine. So I had to get used to dividing my world into objects, which are masculine, and feminine, which for an English person is really quite a challenge. So another thing was rolling my R. In English, we don't say R. It doesn't exist. But in Italian, for example, if you want to say red, you have to say rosso. R. It took me 1 year to learn R. So I had to get used to rolling my R. Terrible. Coffee. In England, we have mugs of coffee like this. In Italy, I had to get used to small amounts of strong coffee. So that was a new habit. But then I found cappuccino, so that was the alternative. And the last thing that I had to get used to was the Italians gesticulating. The Italians use many gestures like and they use their shoulders, and noises as well. And when I saw Italians in the street at the beginning, I thought they were always arguing. But in fact, they're not. It's a normal way for the Italians to gesticulate. So I had to get used to reading the language as not necessarily aggressive. All right, so that's some of the things I had to get used to, all right? Let's go and look at this grammatical form now because it's not easy to use, all right? Let's look at the screen. So to get used to is followed by the gerund form. And it describes this process of changing and taking on a new habit. Look at the examples. I'm getting used to speaking Italian every day. Used to speaking Italian. Now, we use the verb get used to, because it describes the process. And you can put the verb get into any tense, present tense, past tense, future, no problem. Here we have it in the present continuous. So, I'm getting used to speaking Italian every day. Listen to the pronunciation. I said used, with a T sound, used, not used or used, used. That's very important to distinguish it from the other verb, use, okay? Used. The next example, I still haven't got used to driving on the right. Here we have it in the present perfect. I haven't got used to driving on the right. Next example, don't worry, you'll get used to it. For the future, you'll get used to it. All right, so here we have an example in the future, used to it, which is an object. In the past, I had to get used to it. In the question form, how long did it take to get used to? Okay, how long did it take to get used to? So a difficult form. Now let's move on to the next section, which is the verb to be used to. This is very interesting because when you change a habit, it's a process. But then when you have adopted the habit, it's a state. So we use the verb to be. The examples. I'm used to getting up early in the morning. That means that now I do it regularly with no problem. I am used. We use the verb to be for the state. He isn't, negative, used to working alone. In the past, I wasn't used to driving on the right. So here we have a state of a new habit using the verb to be. To get used to do something is adapting a new habit. It's the process. So that's a difficult grammatical form, but it's the only way in English that you can describe taking on new habits. So it's terribly important for you to learn. Don't worry, you'll get used to it slowly but surely. Okay, bye for now.